For nearly 30 years, the full story behind Princess Diana's tragic crash has remained a mystery, with only a few fleeting glimpses caught by the paparazzi. It wasn't until the inquest into her death that firefighter Xavier Galon came into the spotlight. Now retired, he's chosen this moment to reveal his harrowing account of that fateful night in the Pont tunnel. His revelation offers a rare, personal look at what happened in the immediate aftermath, including Diana's final moments. What comes next is something you won't want to miss, as Xavier Galon, the firefighter who heard Princess Diana's last words, finally breaks his silence and shocks everyone. So without further delay, let's dive into Xavier Galon's story from the scene of the accident. The morning of August 31st, 1997 was eerily quiet in Paris. Firefighter Xavier Galon was called to a scene he knew all too well, a devastating car crash caused by a drunk driver's reckless actions. As he and his team rushed toward the chaos, their minds went into overdrive, ready to rescue and save lives. To Xavier, it felt like just another day at the office, but it turned out to be anything but. When he arrived at the crash site, the scene was nothing short of catastrophic. The car was a twisted mess, its steel frame bent and buckled from the impact. Among the wreckage, Xavier's experienced eyes quickly took in the situation. He'd seen it all before, but this was different. His team moved with precision, working to free the trapped occupants from the mangled vehicle. Inside the car, two figures lay motionless, adding a sense of urgency to the rescue efforts. As they carefully worked to free the victims, Xavier's eyes landed on a blonde woman amidst the wreckage. At that moment, her presence seemed almost out of place. He didn't know who she was, just another victim in desperate need of help. But as they got closer, he realized she was still alive, though severely injured. Her breathing was shallow and her face was pale and twisted in shock and pain. Amid the noise of sirens and chaos, she whispered something. Xavier leaned in closer, trying to catch her words. The weight of the moment was overwhelming, but he couldn't have known that these faintly spoken words would echo through history, haunting him forever. At that point, Xavier had no idea that the woman he was helping was Princess Diana. Her whisper was one last connection to the world she was about to leave behind. Xavier wouldn't recognize Diana's identity until later, forever linking him to this tragic chapter in history. When he first arrived, his focus was entirely on providing aid, using every skill at his disposal to comfort the injured woman, unaware that he was part of an event that would captivate the world. Now Xavier Galon, the firefighter who heard Princess Diana's last words, is breaking his silence, shocking the world. But before we dive into that, we need to rewind to the moments leading up to the accident to fully understand what brought this night to change everything. So let's rewind to that fateful night. It was a starry midnight in Paris, and the city was wrapped in a peaceful slumber. Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed slipped away from the buzz of the crowd, seeking a rare moment of peace away from their high-profile lives. They had no idea that just hours later, fate would take a cruel twist. Their escape vehicle, a sleek black Mercedes E280, was parked outside, ready to offer a brief respite from the chaos of public attention. Henry Paul, the driver, appeared professional on the surface, but he was hiding a dangerous secret. He had been drinking before getting behind the wheel. His judgment was already clouded as Diana, Dodi, and their bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones settled into the car. Though Paul looked sober, investigations later revealed that his blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit in France, compounded by medication that further impaired his ability to drive. What's even more baffling is how no one in the car seemed to notice this. Eyewitnesses later recalled Paul's increasingly erratic behavior as he sped through the streets of Paris. He seemed to enjoy the thrill, taunting the paparazzi who had swarmed their vehicle. To him, it was just a game, though one with stakes much higher than he realized. As they raced through the night, Paul boasted, "Lady Diana will be there in 15 minutes, pushing the accelerator harder and harder. What he didn't know was that his reckless actions were about to bring a heartbreaking tragedy. What seemed like a simple plan quickly turned into a dangerous risk. 2 decoy vehicles soon joined the chase, a weak attempt to throw off the paparazzi. But Henry Paul's reckless driving made it clear they weren't just trying to escape photographers. They were heading straight for disaster. The chase intensified as they sped through the streets of Paris, the Mercedes cutting through the cool night air, with the passengers, and especially the driver, unaware of the imminent danger. As they entered the Pont tunnel, the mood shifted. The thrill of escape faded, replaced by an eerie premonition of tragedy. In the dim light of the tunnel, control slipped from Paul's hands. The car swerved and skidded, careening toward a catastrophic end. In a final desperate act, Paul turned to Trevor Rees-Jones and urged him to buckle up, an attempt at safety that felt too little, too late, and went against all standard protocols. Then, with a deafening crash, the Mercedes slammed into a concrete pillar. The sound of crumpling metal echoed through the tunnel, marking the tragic end of their journey. The impact was brutal, transforming the car into a twisted wreck in seconds. It wasn't just a car crash, it was the end of a chapter marked by love, public scrutiny, and global fascination. For those who admired Diana, the news of the accident was a heart-wrenching blow, a loss that reverberated around the world. Looking back at the moments leading up to the crash, it's clear that a string of bad decisions and unfortunate circumstances led to that fateful night. From Paul's choice to drink and drive, to the lack of proper measures to protect Diana and Dodi from the paparazzi, each poor choice stacked the odds against them. Now, as we reflect on those final hours, we shift our focus to the firefighter's perspective. The memory of Diana and Dodi still serves as a powerful reminder of how quickly life can change. Their story, filled with both love and tragedy, continues to captivate and sadden hearts around the world, a timeless narrative of what might have been. But let's return to Xavier Galon and the secrets he revealed when he finally broke his silence. Secrets that shocked the world. His chilling account, as the firefighter who heard Princess Diana's last words, would leave everyone stunned. That night, the air was thick with tension as chaos overtook the crash site in the Pont tunnel. The wreckage was eerily silent, a stark reminder of how quickly fate can tear lives apart. Amid the confusion, bystanders rushed in to help, doing whatever they could. It was into this turmoil that Firefighter Xavier Galon was called. For Galon and his team, the summons to the tunnel was a race against time, a battle to save lives in the face of unimaginable despair. As they sped toward the crash site, their minds were focused, trained to shut out everything except the task at hand. Arriving in under 10 minutes, they dove into the wreckage, their presence offering a brief spark of hope in the darkness. The scene they arrived at was a grim tableau of destruction. Emergency lights cast long shadows over twisted metal and shattered glass. The air was filled with the urgent activity of rescuers and the intermittent wail of sirens. Galon, a seasoned firefighter, quickly took command, his experienced eyes assessing the situation as he directed his team with calm efficiency. It was then that Galon's attention was drawn to a blonde woman, badly injured and barely conscious, lying in the back of the mangled Mercedes. As we mentioned earlier, at that moment, Xavier Galon didn't know he was tending to Princess Diana. His focus was entirely on saving her, a task that demanded every ounce of his skill and dedication. It wasn't until later that the full weight of the situation sank in and he realized just who she was. That revelation would stay with him forever, but we'll get to that in a moment. The efforts to save Diana were frantic and emotionally charged. One doctor who had been passing by had already given some initial care, but the scene required a full team of hands. Galon and his crew worked tirelessly, unaware that they were part of a tragedy that would captivate the world. As they fought to save her, the reality of what they were facing began to set in. This wasn't just any rescue. It was a desperate attempt to save a global icon whose life hung in the balance. The pressure was overwhelming, the urgency undeniable. It was only recently that Xavier Galon, the firefighter who heard Princess Diana's last words, finally broke his silence. His revelation shocked everyone. It was as if he could no longer keep the details of that night a secret. Reflecting on the tragic events, Galon's words carried a sense of solemnity and resignation. To him, the incident was a stark reminder of how fragile life is and how ordinary his work felt despite the extraordinary circumstances. "I simply saw it as a tragic traffic incident," he admitted later, a statement that highlighted the everyday bravery that first responders demonstrate, even in the face of unimaginable events. In the aftermath, as the world mourned Princess Diana, Galon and his team were left to grapple with the personal impact of that night. They had done their best under incredibly difficult conditions, and that was something they could hold on to. Their efforts stand as a testament to the courage and dedication of those who serve in the shadows during high-stakes emergencies. That fateful night in Paris, under the eerie glow of emergency lights, Xavier Galon faced the challenge of his life, forever linked to the tragic legacy of a princess lost too soon. As the city slowly returned to normal, the echoes of that night would remain in his mind, an ever-present reminder of the night he raced against fate in the heart of darkness. In the immediate aftermath of the crash, firefighter Xavier Galon was confronted with a devastating scene. The driver, Henry Paul, had tragically lost his life in an instant. Despite the overwhelming grief and chaos, there was still a flicker of hope for the others trapped in the wreckage. Dodie Fayette and Trevor Reese-Jones were still alive, barely, amidst the twisted remains of what had once been a sleek Mercedes. Steely determination took over Galon and his team as they launched into action. Every move they made was a race against time. The front of the car was a mess of twisted metal, and Reese-Jones, the bodyguard, was trapped, his face bearing the brutal marks of the crash. Through the chaos of broken glass and mangled steel, Reese-Jones's voice pierced through, desperate and fearful, but still filled with concern for Princess Diana. Despite his own pain and confusion, his first thoughts were for her safety. Galon, understanding the gravity of the situation, tried to offer comfort, his words a calm reassurance amid the storm of activity around them. With a heavy heart, he turned to where Reese-Jones had desperately called out for Princess Diana. She lay shrouded in the shadows at the back of the car, her condition unknown as the rescue mission continued. Her form lay still and haunting in the dim light. As Xavier Galon approached, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on him. The faint light barely illuminated her, but as his trained eyes adjusted, he detected a slight pulse, a gentle rise and fall of her chest amid the wreckage. This small sign of life became a beacon of hope in the midst of such destruction. Galon knelt beside Princess Diana, taking in the sight of the severely injured but still alive woman. His heart raced with a mixture of relief and deep concern as he assessed her condition. She had a slight abrasion on her shoulder, an injury that in the grand chaos around them seemed almost minor. Gently, he took her hand, offering her words of comfort. "Be calm and keep still," he whispered, his voice steady and reassuring in the dark, chaotic environment. It was a plea for her to hold on, a silent prayer in the darkness, urging her to find the strength to survive despite the dire circumstances. As the rescue effort continued, the urgency was palpable. The team worked tirelessly, navigating the wreckage to provide aid, all while hoping to stave off the shadow of death that loomed over them. Galon and his team were a portrait of professionalism and compassion. Every move they made a testament to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of calamity. The night air was filled with the sounds of sirens and shouting, an intense contrast to the quiet moments of human connection unfolding inside the crumpled Mercedes. Each second was critical, and the firefighters moved with precision, driven by an unwavering commitment to save lives. In the end, the rescue efforts were a harrowing blend of hope and heartbreak. The team did everything they could to change the course of that tragic night. Every movement and decision was a fight against fate. Xavier Galon, forever marked by the events of that night, eventually broke his silence and exposed all the details of his experience, speaking with a mix of reverence and sorrow. The ordinary had collided with the extraordinary, forever altering the lives of everyone involved. In the tense quiet that enveloped the crash site, Firefighter Xavier Galon became a crucial pillar of strength. For nearly an hour, he stayed by Princess Diana's side, his calm presence offering comfort amid the chaos. As he carefully treated her injuries, he spoke to her gently, trying to ease her pain and fear. In the overwhelming silence, Diana's voice barely rose above a whisper, yet her words carried a profound weight. "My God, what's happened?" she asked, her fragile tone reflecting the shock and confusion of the moment. Deeply moved, Galon could only offer his presence as solace, fully recognizing the gravity of the situation. Even though the firefighters put in an incredible amount of effort, fate still managed to show its harsh side. While the ambulance was taking Diana away, Galon stood back and felt the full weight of her impending loss. It was a loss that seemed both personal and profound, and it extended far beyond the immediate sorrow. While everything was going on, the rescue operation continued to get more intense. As the electric chainsaw sped through the debris, its razor-sharp blades sliced through the metal with a speed and efficiency that was both urgent and effective. Galon never left Diana's side, and hence remained a constant source of reassurance despite the chaos and the commotion that was going on around them. "I gave her some oxygen," he remembered later, revealing how he was able to provide assistance despite the intense amount of pressure that was being applied. His hands remained calm in spite of the mayhem that was going on around him, and with each passing second they were getting closer and closer to a reality that was extremely upsetting. The team worked tirelessly to extract Princess Diana from the twisted wreckage of the automobile, but the situation became increasingly dire as they continued their efforts. At precisely the moment when they were making headway, another tragedy began to unfold. The condition of Diana experienced a dramatic decline. Suddenly, she stopped breathing after a moment of pause. In a split second, the sliver of hope that she might be able to survive was lost, and her body was completely overcome by the severe injuries that she had endured. The night air appeared to become more dense with grief as the realization of her passing became more apparent. As a person who had been a rock of support and hope, Xavier Galon was suddenly confronted with the tremendous pain of seeing a life pass away. His role had switched from that of a rescuer to that of a witness, and he was standing in the shadow of the tragic death of a global symbol. Immediately, Galon's training began to take effect. Amidst the destruction caused by the collision, he provided an explanation of the responsibility that is carried by first responders. It was at that precise moment when Galon initiated resuscitation operations on Diana. They are able to provide aid that can save lives with a sense of urgency and expertise. He fought against the passage of time and fate, fighting tirelessly to bring her back to life. It appeared as though time itself had stopped moving for a brief period of time. It seemed as though his efforts were paying off miraculously. The resumption of Diana's breathing was a glimmer of life surviving the mayhem. While Galon was thinking about that particular time, he expressed the extent of his dedication. "You have a strong desire to save lives when you are a first responder. I had the impression that we had just rescued hers," he added. However, the joy did not last for very long. The serenity of the night was broken by the hurried sirens of the ambulance as they rushed Diana to the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital. This was a striking contrast to the shadow of tragedy that was hanging over them at the time. However, fate turned out to be unkind. As Diana was being transported to the hospital, she experienced yet another heart attack, which caused her situation to rapidly deteriorate. In an effort to save Princess Diana's life, the ambulance raced through the dark streets of Paris before coming to a sudden stop. At the same time, medical staff were frantically trying to provide cardiopulmonary resuscitation and defibrillation. Upon arriving at the hospital at approximately 2:10 a.m., she was instantly thrown into a tornado of sudden and unexpected surgical procedures. As the medical staff struggled to control her internal bleeding, the hallways of the hospital were filled with a flurry of activity. As the rigorous attempts were being carried out, Galon, who had accompanied her to the hospital, observed them unfold. Since every second counted, the medical staff was doing everything in their power to try and save her by any means necessary. Diana had survived her second heart attack by the time it was 2:45 in the morning, but her condition was still very serious. In spite of the overwhelming magnitude of her injuries, the physicians worked tirelessly to ensure that she would survive each and every hour. The early morning of September 1st brought a grim reality to the situation. Despite the fact that they had conducted nearly 2 hours of cardiac massage and urgent surgery simultaneously, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning when Princess Diana was pronounced dead and the hushed murmurs of fatigued medical workers were heard. In the flash of an eye, a tragic event that marked a heartbreaking and profound conclusion to her life's narrative, the world had lost an icon, a woman who was revered by many people. Following the collision, Galon went back to his work, bearing the burden of the events that transpired that evening with him. At the time, he was working a double shift at the fire station, and it was there, among his fellow employees, that he was informed of the tragic consequences that the accident had brought about. Diana had not survived, and Dodi Fayed had passed away at the scene of the accident. The news was devastating. The only person who had miraculously survived the ordeal was Trevor Rees-Jones, who was the bodyguard. This piece of information broke the frail hope that Galon had been clinging to, and the knowledge that he had been a part of such a big and awful event was overpowering. The full gravity of the events that had transpired throughout the night started to dawn on Xavier Galon as he was surrounded by the camaraderie of the fire station. He was sworn to confidentiality despite the fact that he was bound by duty and the stringent regulations of his trade. It was forbidden for him to talk about the incident because he was a member of the French military and a firefighter. Galon's decision to keep quiet turned out to be a burdensome obligation that he bore for more than 20 years. His role that night was crucial, but it was shrouded in secrecy, and it turned out to be a chapter in his life that was kept quiet, and only a select few people were aware of it. Despite the passage of time, the recollections of that night continued to be particularly vivid and guarded. The experience that Galon had, as well as the information that he eventually revealed, exemplifies the enormous impact that abrupt worldwide calamities have on the people who find themselves in the middle of them, without any prior warning. As a heartbreaking reflection on duty, fate, and the personal toll that public tragedy has on individuals, His narrative serves as an example. After Galon finally broke his silence, his tale provided a unique insider's perspective on a night that captivated and grieved people all around the world. Despite the fact that they are frequently thrown into the public glare under the most terrible circumstances, experts in emergency response are required to maintain professional detachment because they are obligated by the ethics of their roles. This event brought to light the harsh realities of emergency response. His statement, which is now a part of the public record, gives light on the human factors that are behind the headlines. It is a sobering reminder of the perseverance that is required to manage the complexity of such significant events in history. Following his retirement from the military, Galon eventually broke his years of silence after the death of Princess Diana, which had a tremendous impact on the world. He exposed the weight of what he had experienced, offering the world a look into the tremendous toll that such disasters leave on the people who are caught up in them. He was driven by a great need to share his frightening memories from that fatal night, and he did so by revealing the weight of what he had witnessed. Xavier Galon, who currently resides in Brittany and is in charge of the emergency services at Brest Airport, continues to bear the weighty recollections of that night. These memories serve as a continual reminder of the precarious nature of life and the enduring legacy that Princess Diana has left behind. Across the entirety of the United Kingdom, the passing of Diana had a profound effect on the people. National sadness was shared by people all around the country, from the crowded streets of London to the peaceful countryside. The gates of Kensington Palace were buried by a sea of floral tributes, with each bouquet and emotional note serving as a witness to the profound affection that the people's princess had inspired. A woman whose life had been defined by both compassion and public scrutiny received a tremendous amount of support from the general population, which manifested itself as a palpable statement of sorrow and veneration for her. Galon revealed additional facts as he reflected on the aftermath of Diana's death, recalling the extraordinary events that took place in the week following her passing away. He was astonished by the way in which she had caught the imagination and hearts of people all across the world. "The scenes at her funeral were something I never imagined I'd witness," he added. As he explained the collective grieving and the personal impact it had on him, his voice contained a mixture of amazement and melancholy. He was describing the collective mourning. In spite of the fact that a number of years have passed, Galon frequently finds himself thinking back to that terrible evening. "The images are etched in my memory, persistent and vivid," he stated candidly. "It's something I'll never forget, especially around this time of year." The tragic event that took place in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel continues to be a somber sight. It is a location that is frequently visited by tourists who are drawn to the location by the tragic story of the beloved princess. The views of Galon provide a personal touch to the historic event, drawing attention to the profound wounds that are inflicted on people who are witnesses to and respond to those disasters that receive widespread media attention. At the same time that we are remembering Princess Diana, Galon's disclosures encourage us to contemplate the significance of her life and the great sorrow that we feel over her untimely loss. He is brought back to the echoes of the past that continue to resonate throughout his life with each and every call that he receives to contact the crash site. This serves as a sharp reminder of the night in question.
What if Princess Diana could have been saved if she got to the hospital faster? When the terrible news of Princess Diana's death came out on August 30th, 1997, the whole was in shock. The doctor who tried to save Diana's life has finally spoken out after years of silence, and what he said shocked everyone. As news came in from the Pitié-Salpêtrière hospital, all eyes were on the medical staff, which was led by surgeon Dr. Monsef Daman. Many people came up with crazy ideas about what happened, and soon the doctors who had worked so hard to save her were unfairly blamed. The question, could they have done more, has been asked for years. Before we get into what he said about that terrible night, let's go back and remember how it all started. Diana and her friend Dodi Al-Fayed were on a boat in the beautiful French and Italian Riviera on what seemed like a normal summer day. No one could have thought that what began as a quiet vacation would quickly turn into something terrible. The private jet that Princess Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed were on landed at Paris's Le Bourget airport on August 30th, 1997. They were only in the City of Lights for a short time before moving on to London. Their plan? Spent the night at the fancy Hotel Ritz Paris, which was owned by Dodi's dad, Mohammed Al-Fayed. This place was not only fancy, but it was also close to Mohammed's flat, making it easy to get away from the constant paparazzi. The hotel staff came up with a plan to get around the persistent photographers. They would send out a fake car from the Ritz's main door to hide the real one. Diana and Dodi would sneak out of the house through a back door in the meantime. At 12:20 a.m., they got into a black 1994 Mercedes-Benz S280 in secret, hoping for a smooth, quiet ride. But they didn't know that things would soon go badly on this car ride. They set out with Trevor Rees-Jones in the front and Henry Paul, who is the deputy head of security at the Ritz, behind the wheel. One small thing that would later turn out to be very important was that none of them were wearing seat belts. The plan was easy: stay out of the way of the cameras and don't make a fuss. The tour went by the lovely Place de la Concorde and along the Seine River. It was very quiet at night, but all of a sudden, things changed. At 12:23 a.m., just 3 minutes later, as they went into the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, something terrible happened. Then, though, something strange happened. Henri Paul lost control of the car and swerved all over the place to avoid a strange white Fiat. The Mercedes turned quickly and hit the 13th pillar of the tunnel head-on at 65 mph, which is over twice the speed limit and very dangerous. It had a terrible effect. Lost control of the car, it hit the stone wall of the tunnel and came to a terrible stop. The front of the car was a mess, and the fact that there were no guardrails made things even worse. This led to chaos. Early witnesses said they saw strange scenes of smoke rising from the wrecks. The paparazzi who were following them quickly arrived at the scene before emergency services could even arrive. What to do in an emergency? Princess Diana miraculously lived through the first crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, which set off a mad dash to save her life. The next few seconds were a mix of chaos and order as everyone there started to understand how bad things were. In the dark tunnel, among the wreckage of the black Mercedes, an unlikely hero stepped up. Dr. Frederick Mallier, a doctor who wasn't on duty but was passing by. He was the first person to offer Diana help. Even though she didn't seem hurt, she was in shock and barely aware. She kept saying, "Oh my God," and begged, "Leave me alone," in a soft voice. The scene looked like it was from a movie. There were flashing lights from both cameras and emergency cars, and it was a quiet night in Paris. People often think of the paparazzi as bad because they are always trying to get the perfect shot. At the scene, they responded in different ways. Some people, being more caring, rushed in to help and tried to open the bent car doors. But some people, who were caught up in the chaos, kept taking pictures, which later made shocked onlookers angry and even led to some physical fights. After the crash, police and firefighters came around 12:30 a.m. amidst all the chaos. The cops started setting up the scene right away, and soon after, an ambulance arrived. Things were tense inside the ambulance. Diana was put to sleep after a short period of anxiety, during which she tried to take out her IV. While they were moving her, she suddenly went into cardiac arrest. The medical staff worked very hard and were able to start her heart beating again with CPR. Diana was finally freed from the wreckage at 1:18 a.m. The ambulance left for the Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital at 1:41 a.m. and arrived at 2:06 a.m. When they got to the hospital, the medical staff had a huge problem. Diana had serious internal injuries, like a heart that was out of place, and her chest and arm were badly hurt. It was a tough fight, even for the most skilled doctors. Even though they did everything they could, like massaging Diana's heart, her situation got worse. Sadly, she died at 4 a.m. after a fight to save her that was full of false hopes and devastating defeats. At 6 a.m., there was a news gathering where her death was announced. It was a heartbreaking event that shocked people all over the world. Everyone was sad about the death of such a well-liked person. Late that same day, both the French Prime Minister and the Interior Minister paid their respects at the hospital. Soon after, Prince Charles and Diana's sisters arrived in Paris, starting a time of sadness around the world for a famous person. When they went to the hospital with President Jacques Chirac, they were both very sad and thankful for the doctors who worked so hard to save Diana. Her body was brought back to the UK in a very sad way, with all the respect and sadness it earned. The Royal Standard was used to carefully move her body from RAF Northolt to the Hammersmith and Fulham morgue. But that crash did more than just kill someone. It led to a lot of questions and probes. That will be a big deal to talk about later. French police looked for every sign, like a strange white Fiat Uno that was seen in the crash, but they could never figure out who drove it. French investigators finally found that the driver, Henry Paul, was mostly to blame for the accident because he was going too fast and was drunk. His drug and alcohol levels were checked, which led to more rumors about his state that night. Some people, like Robin Cook, the British Foreign Secretary, and Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, said that the tragedy was caused by the cameras. This brought attention to the bigger problem of privacy invasions and media intrusions. Even so, none of the shooters were charged, even though they were accused. You may be wondering how the royal family dealt with everything after Diana's death. A lot of people didn't like what they saw because the whole world was watching. People thought the royal family's answer was a bit stiff, even cold. At Balmoral, Queen Elizabeth II was with Prince Philip and her grandsons, William and Harry. She chose to keep the boys out of the public eye. Some saw this as a grandma protecting her grieving grandchildren, but many people thought the royals were being rude by not recognizing the country's sadness. It was hard for them to balance what the people wanted with their own pain, and not everyone was happy with how they did it. Charles, Diana's ex-husband, had to tell their boys, who were only 15 and 12 years old at the time, the terrible news. Charles took on his role as both guardian and comforter for his boys, even though royal duties usually come first. He did this to show that beneath the titles, they were just a family dealing with a painful loss. As word got out that Diana had died, people who were sad left a lot of flowers and other memories outside of Kensington Palace. But while everyone else was sad, the royal family's silence was shocking. It wasn't until 5 days later that the Queen came back to London from Balmoral and gave a live speech to the whole country. In her words, she admitted how sad she was and called Diana a remarkable person. She said that she admired Diana's drive and desire to help others, and she hoped that everyone could respect her life, even though it was cut short. Someone brought up the idea of Diana's funeral being open to the public. Diana had won the hearts of the country as the people's princess, but she wasn't close to the royal family. At the end of the day, a public event was chosen to show how important she was to many people. The royal family held a grand service for her at Westminster Abbey on September 6, 1997. A lot of people were very sad. A lot of famous people, like US First Lady Hillary Clinton and Elton John, played a touching new version of Candle in the Wind that was written in Diana's honor. The cheers that broke out after Diana's brother, Earl Spencer, gave a touching and sometimes sharp tribute were one of the most memorable parts of the day. He spoke badly about the press and the royal family for how they had treated Diana in a sneaky way. This change from the usual seriousness of royal funerals brought out how difficult Diana's relationship was with the group she used to be a part of. After the service, Diana was buried in a private ceremony at Althorpe, the home of her family. Her final resting place, which was on an island in the estate's lovely pleasure garden, seemed to represent both her separation from the royal family and her link to her family history, the theories of conspiracy. Of course, the sad death of Princess Diana led to a lot of conspiracy theories. People put together different parts of the story to make a web of suspicion and mystery. Numerous of these ideas are based on Mohammed Al-Fayed, who was Diana's father and died with her. His belief that the two were killed on purpose by the British elite has not changed. Mohammed has long said that important people in Britain couldn't stand the thought of Diana marrying his son, who was an Egyptian Muslim. This sounds like something out of a thriller. He said that this connection was seen as a threat to the purity of the monarchy, and that those in power planned for them to be killed because of it. Mohammed's claims have kept the theory fires going, making sure that people are still arguing passionately about what happened that terrible night. There are even people who blame the medical staff who tried to save Diana, which makes the fire even hotter. They give a dramatic account of what happened, saying that Diana wasn't killed in the crash, but was killed on purpose at the hospital. These ideas usually center on the claimed delays in getting her to the hospital and the medical procedures she underwent, saying that they were all part of a sinister British plan to kill her. Dr. Monsef Daman, who led the team at Pitié-Salpêtrière Hospital that fought to save her life, is the most important person in this idea. Some people who believe in conspiracies think that Diana's late arrival at the hospital wasn't just a mistake, but part of a planned attack. They said that the delay was meant to make her situation worse, so that it would be easier for the medical team, who were supposedly acting on orders from British intelligence, to make sure she wouldn't make it. Some of them even say that the doctors gave her the wrong treatments on purpose to kill her faster. But the doctor who tried to save her, Dr. Monsef Daman, has strongly denied these statements. He tells everyone that he and his team did everything they could to help Diana, and he's talked about how her death made him feel. That night, that wasn't about some evil plan for Dr. Daman. It was about doing everything he could to save a life. He thinks that the conspiracy theories change the truth and don't honor the hard work and commitment of the medical staff. The investigation into Operation Paget. There were a lot of rumors and crazy ideas that led to Operation Paget, a huge investigation by the British Metropolitan Police led by Lord John Stevens. It began in 2004 with the goal of figuring out how Princess Diana died and putting an end to all the many conspiracy theories. No stone was left unturned during Operation Paget. The team had two main objectives. First, to learn as much as possible about the crash, and second, to look closely at Diana's medical care. A lot of the ideas said that the crash wasn't just a bad accident, but something that was planned ahead of time to be bad. Many people pointed the finger at the royal family and the British Secret Services. Some said MI6 planned Diana's death with direct orders from the royal family. Mohammed Al-Fayed, who was the father of Dodi Fayed and also tragically died in the crash, gave this whole conspiracy idea a lot of support. According to Mohammed, there was definitely foul play going on. His public accusations and legal battles kept these ideas alive in the media, which led to an official reaction. That answer came in the form of Operation Paget, which looked everywhere. As part of their study, The team talked to important witnesses, experts in different fields, and went over every detail of Diana's care that night. They hired top forensic experts, like doctors and accident investigators, to look over all the evidence and figure out what went so horribly wrong. The cameras were something that the team really paid attention to. Many people thought that the fact that they kept chasing Diana's car was a big reason why the accident happened. Because of this, the probe looked into how the constant pressure from the media on Diana might have led to the crash. A lot of attention was also paid to the medical care Diana got right after the crash. Some people who believe in conspiracy said that her care was delayed on purpose, but Operation Paget found no proof of this. It turned out that the French emergency team was just doing what they always do. They stabilized Diana at the scene of the crime. This is called stay and play, before rushing her to the hospital. This plan was meant to give her the best chance of living, even though she was badly hurt. After 3 years of research, the team finally put together a huge 832-page study that explained everything they had found. What did they come to? When looked at more closely, the conspiracy ideas just didn't make sense. To make things clear, a big study said the crash was an awful accident, not part of a secret plan. It put all the blame on Henri Paul, the driver who was drunk, and the reporters who were following Diana's car. In 2008, a coroner's inquest agreed with this and said that Diana and Dodi's deaths were unlawful killing because the driver was drunk and the reporters were too aggressive. Diana wasn't wearing a seatbelt, which made her injuries worse, the inquiry also said. Let us now talk about Dr. Monsef, the doctor who worked so hard to save Princess Diana. We talked about him before when we were talking about conspiracy ideas. Then he finally spoke out, telling the Daily Mail his side of the story. He said that the night at the emergency room started out like any other until something very strange happened. She was badly hurt in the car accident and was rushed in around 2 a.m. Right away, Dr. Monsef and his team knew they were facing a big problem. Diana had already had a heart attack, and the rescuers were working hard to get her stable before taking her to the hospital. The doctors got right to work as soon as Princess Diana arrived at the hospital. A lot of X-rays were taken, and the readings were not good. Diana's left pulmonary vein was torn badly, and she was bleeding inside. This is a tough and dangerous injury. Dr. Monsef knew how bad it was, so he chose to do a thoracotomy, which means he opened up her chest to try to fix the problem. He found a tear in the pericardium, the sac that protects the heart, during this high-pressure surgery. This was an even bigger problem. Her chest was filled with blood because of the tear. This put a lot of stress on her heart and made it hard for it to pump properly. Because he knew the case was too complicated to handle by himself, Dr. Monsef called for help. Professor Alain Paget, a famous French heart surgeon, arrived at the scene around 2:30 a.m. He took over and moved Diana to a different operating room for more complicated surgery. This gave everyone a spark of hope. Dr. Monsef, his team, and Professor Paget did everything they could, but Diana's injuries were just too bad. The events of that night changed Dr. Monsef in a way that he didn't talk about for over 20 years. Dr. Monsef Daman recently broke his silence and told new things about the crazy night Princess Diana died. There are reports that Prince Charles could be arrested in connection with Diana's death, which adds another twist to the story. It would be big news in the UK and around the world if these stories turned out to be true. People have been saying for a while that Prince Charles might have had a reason to be a part of a plan against Diana. He may have wanted to marry Camilla Parker Bowles, and Diana was seen as getting in the way of that. There have been rumors that Charles may have removed Diana to make room for his romance with Camilla. Going back to what Dr. Monsef Darman recently said, he gave an amazing account of what happened that night. Diana was in very bad shape when she was rushed into the operating room because she was bleeding very badly inside. The well-known Professor Allen was part of Dr. Monsef's team, and they acted quickly to find the source of the... A big tear was quickly found in Diana's upper left pulmonary vein, which is a very important blood vessel. This kind of injury was very bad, and it made the operations harder. Professor Allen led the way and worked carefully to fix the torn vein. Dr. Monsef said that the operation room was tense and focused, and that everyone there knew how important every second was. Diana's torn vein had to be fixed right away if she was going to be saved. Even though they used the best methods and were very exact, the situation was very tough. Diana's heart had stopped, mostly because she had been hurt so badly and lost so much blood. Now that the line was fixed, the doctors had to do something even harder: bring Diana back to life. Dr. Monsef Darman talked about the hard work that came next. The team did every possible thing to get her heart beating again, such as manual cardiac massage, where they pumped the heart by hand, and multiple defibrillation tries, which usually worked but didn't this time. For an hour, the room was filled with doctors' determined faces, pressing orders, and the beeping of monitors. Dr. Monsef gave Diana a lot of different medicines to try to get her heart beating again and keep her situation stable. It became clear that their work might not be enough as time went on. At 4:06 a.m., when all other options had been exhausted, the team made the heartbreaking choice to stop trying to save the life. Dr. Monsef and his co-workers were very sad when they learned that Princess Diana had died. No matter how they felt, the moment was a crushing loss for everyone who had given their all to save a woman who was loved by many people around the world. After a night that was both public and deeply personal, the team had to deal with the fallout. They were upset and overwhelmed, knowing that they had fought not only for a patient, but for a worldwide figure, made Dr. Monsef think about how deeply the event had affected them emotionally. That operating room and the whole world were changed by Princess Diana's death in a big way. When Dr. Monsef thought about that terrible night, he felt a deep sense of duty and was very aware that their work was being watched around the world. He was sure they did everything they could to save her, even though the end result was terrible. So what do you think about Dr. Monsef's point of view?